Budget formats, aka Pauper, Commoner, and so on, are niche and popular subculture formats in many trading card games. And while these formats, of course, as per their very definition, serve as budget or cheap ways in which to play the game, and also with which to put players of all backgrounds on a common level, pun absolutely intended, they also serve as a fantastic entry point with which to bring in new players to the gaming community. The attraction to something like a commons-only type format, though, goes beyond simply the budget part. It's an attraction to a distinct and pure line of play. In many cases, these formats highlight fundamental and core game mechanics, as it caps and restricts the wombo combo type interactions and instead rewards efficiency, value advantage play, and smart deck building. Now, when oftentimes 90% or more of the cost of our Flesh and Blood deck lies in the equipment, it's pretty easy to see the allure of such a format. By capping the rarity and thus the cost, it makes it more approachable to new players, which are of extreme value to our growing communities. However, part of what sets Flesh and Blood apart as a game, which is its unique start full and its hero-driven system, actually serves to somewhat hamper or limit the success of these formats. Because our heroes align and dictate our lines of play, if too many tools are unavailable within the card pool, the result is an even narrower meta in which only the most efficient heroes rise to the top. So to take on this problem statement, many TOs and groups across the world have introduced their own spins on budget formats. And while they certainly all are finding success to varying degrees, the fact that various allowances are required in the first place kind of highlights some of the challenges that we face. So in today's video, I'm discussing the concept of budget formats in FaB and asking the question if, in the current environment and in the current card pool, if FaB budget formats are actually able to be truly successful. And the too long didn't watch version is this. Right now, budget formats are absolutely an awesome community builder. But as a formal format, which to be fair doesn't yet exist, they are likely more unbalanced than the two constructed format counterparts. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. I'm Andrew with you here as always. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I gotta be honest with you guys, this video is probably a bad idea. And what I mean by that is this, right? The people who look down on us dirty scrubs for even having a conversation about pauper formats or commoner formats, whatever it may be, they're just not going to care about it and they're just not going to watch the video. And on the flip side, the people who do care about commoner tend to be really, really passionate about pauper or commoner or whatever it may be. And they're in turn not going to like what I have to say. So it's like trolling for dislikes. And I'm kind of joking, right? And I'm fine with it because that's ultimately why we're here, is to spark thought and have conversation, see what we can do to actually improve the situation for all of us and help grow the community. So tonight we're talking budget formats in Flesh and Blood and asking if they are currently actually viable, or if instead they are, well, absolutely more welcoming on the surface, asking if they're actually more unbalanced than the two constructed format counterparts, aka Blitz and Classic Constructed. Now, how I want to approach this tonight is I want to look at the advantages and disadvantages of budget. Now, the advantages are pretty clear, right? The first being that it's cheap, right? Now, I do want to be pretty clear going into this and set expectations that I think a lot of times people don't realize that cheap means different things to different people, especially in the card gaming world, right? A lot of people in Flesh and Blood have come from other card games in which, you may say, well, $800 for a deck is pretty standard. And that's fine if someone else is coming from a card gaming background. They probably agree with you. They might even say, well, maybe, my commander deck's worth $8,000 or whatever it may be, right? But then if you compare that to someone who's coming into card gaming for the first time from like a board gaming background, right? They may have been able to get their favorite board game plus the 3 expansions for $150, and they never felt like anything was going out of style or, anything like that, right? Nothing became unplayable because a new hero was released or whatever it may be, right? So it's very important to put cheap in perspective. Now, from a common standpoint currently within the state of the game, with the exception of a few of them, and you guys remember back in the day when Crucible was where it was, before the Crucible Unlimited came out, like even Hit and Run was like a $5 or $6 common. And that's not that uncommon. No, but I mean, that's not that odd to see even within some Magic Pauper formats and stuff. I mean, there are some, right? But, and yes, folks, we are going to be referencing the big evil. We are going to be referencing Magic Shovel Time Stuff this cast because they have the established Pauper format. I mean, it's an official format for them. And I mean, it sets the standard by which all things are measured. Just reality of the situation. I think most of us have, many of us have played it. Again, I've got to set myself back in the same metric that I was using for cheapness of remembering people from other backgrounds. But there's no denying that Pauper at its very core, I mean, I specifically referenced the cost of equipment and stuff like that. There's no denying that it serves as an easy entry point and that it's very approachable on the surface. And the primary reason for that isn't just the money, but it's also that it's a great teaching point because it focuses in on game fundamentals, right? You don't need to worry about taking, 8 sabers to the face or whatever it may be, because you're really focusing in on, attacking and blocking and, FaB, right? Flesh and blood at its core. The flip side of that, though, is that there are realistically some disadvantages with that. And in the intro, I'd spoken to the hero system being a limiter to Flesh and Blood in terms of the common and budget formats. And I kind of wanted to go more in depth on that and explain myself. So in other games, these budget formats tend to be more diverse and dynamic, and that's what attracts a lot of people to them. As casual formats, they stoke creativity. And you often see, as such, a wide range of options, anything from theme to tribal to efficiency and so on. In Flesh and Blood, though, our selected hero dictates and can narrow our lines of play. And with an even more limited and narrow card pool, at least as of today, this often takes distinct tools away from our heroes, which just naturally limits our play options, right? If your hero has 3 options, but only the cards to do one of them, you don't have a choice, right? So heroes whose linchpin cards are primarily commons or have viable substitutes for their Majestics or whatever will shine. Whereas heroes who depend on key cards that are not commons and have no viable substitute will naturally struggle. So what I wanted to do tonight to kind of prove my point and go into this was I wanted to look at some of the heroes that are out in Flesh and Blood. And we're not going to go through all of them because we don't have 19 hours to be here, right? But let's look at my girl, my favorite girl. Let's look at Dorinthea, right? Dorinthea really struggles in a commoner aspect because she doesn't have, what I'm showing right now across the screen are the cards that facilitate second swings for her, right? She loses 50% of her cards that facilitate second swings. Now, that in itself isn't always necessarily a problem. Hit and Run can actually do very good things. But even so, if you look at Driving Blade, you look at Hit and Run versus a Valor or a Spoils of War, it fundamentally changes her cost curve, right? Now, that in of itself isn't a bad thing, except for the fact that she doesn't really have any substitutes with which to back that up, right? So Dorinthea faces a lot of... Dorinthea is not at the same... Dorinthea loses more as compared to a lot of other heroes within a commons-only format analysis. And to be clear, going through this analysis, I think I forgot to mention that I am looking at commons-only, right? You guys see the rarity symbols there that I'm showing. So you can put it all in perspective as we go. But in a commons-only format, she loses 50% of her stuff, right? She has the bolters, great, good for her. Everybody's got common equipment. But she does really have to push then into a primary reaction strategy. And that means that fundamentally her ability is not really being utilized, right? So one could ask the question is Dorinthea is she the right play? Right? So Now the next day, so I'm focusing a lot in on the WTR heroes. We'll do some others, but Katsu is another really interesting case, right? So what I'm showing across the screen right now, we'll do this in two phases because he's got a lot of them. But I wanted to look at all of the ninja combos, and what you can see is that none of the ninja combos you can complete without going into rares, right? We have some that are rares. His specific one is common, super. And then if you go to the next set, which is the Crucible ones, you see that it doesn't even play around. It just goes common, rare, majestic, common, rare, majestic. So Katsu, if you're looking at him, well, his whole job is to go pull combos, right? But there's not, like, that's not really a thing. So, like, why are you going to, I mean, granted, he's the only ninja in Classic Constructed, but a lot of times you're going to be playing Blitz in this anyway. So, like, why would you play Katsu over Aria? Right? I mean, that's basically the question. And if you're in CC, isn't there probably somebody who can do Kadachi, something else? I mean, Briar. I mean, right? I mean, you see what I'm saying, right? If Katsu, who's already less efficient than Briar, loses his tools, he becomes even less efficient. More or less efficient? I think that's right. I think more or less efficient. And then oh my girl Azalea. Oh my girl. So, I mean, this one's probably not fair, but I'm putting it up because I love her anyway, right? But you look at her tricks, Azalea loses reload in commoner format. She has no reload. And that may not be true. Maybe there's like one card out there that effectively has reload. Like, isn't there Silver, the tip or something that it's not reload, but it's effectively that? But like losing reload for Azalea. Now, granted, she has Memorial Ground, but she can't redliner. She can't use Boltyn shot. I mean, she's not playable in CC as it is, and then she loses way, way, way more than everybody else. Now, next we go into the Crucible heroes, Kassai, Benji, and other such heroes. So Kassai actually answers a lot of the problems that we spoke to earlier about Dorinthea. Like, Kassai can run Driving Blade and get stuff out of it, which is great, except there's a distinct problem. Kassai is a rare. A lot of these weapons that they're using are rares in Crucible of War. Now, you know, a lot of groups out there have made exceptions to that, where you can use, you know, the heroes don't necessarily count, the weapons don't necessarily count. But one of the things is, like, when you're making an exception, like, well, what about the other exceptions, right? I mean, you have to have hard, I mean, and fine, you can loosen the rules. I mean, you're building community, that's completely fine, no complaints there. But, you know, if you're doing, well, I can do my hero and my weapon, but not my equipment. Well, I mean, can I do my equipment? Like, what if we all just get one equipment, right? And it just goes from there. And, you know, it's kind of a weird, it's not a bad thing. And again, you can do whatever you want for your community or your tournament. You're running it. So you do what you want, man. It's your party. You can cry if you want to. But you start to see, you know, kind of the line of, well, if we do this, what's the next step? And all of a sudden we're playing normal Blitz again. And anyway, now, I did want to talk a bit about Bravo here. Bravo actually doesn't suck in Commoner, right? Because he can just hammer all day long. My problem with Bravo in Commoner is that he loses all of his crushes, which means that what does Bravo do all day long? Hammer, right? He doesn't have anything else. Like, he just hammers, and he pummels, and he hammers, and he pummels, and he hammers, and he pummels, and he defends, and he pummels. He doesn't have crushes. He doesn't have life gain. He just hammers all day long. Now, Ira players probably don't fundamentally have a problem with that because they just stab something. I get it. But even though he's probably pretty good in Commoner, isn't he kind of boring, right? Like, I mean, that is a drawback. I'm not saying that's a negative. I'm just saying that is a drawback to certain people. That one of the OG heroes that is pretty decent within the format is pretty repetitive, right? Pretty repetitive. On the flip side, you see I noticed I switched over there to Commoner advantages talking about Ira. Ira's playstyle is essentially unaffected. Sure, she loses some great tricks. She loses, you know, the Kadachi CNC or whatever you want to do. But fundamentally, her playstyle is unaffected. She's just playing good stuff FaB. She loses Mask, obviously bad, but like, she's still fundamentally trying to do the same thing. She's going to stab, kick. She's going to stab, punch. whatever it may be, right? She's going to stab 0. Ira largely unaffected, which means that, guess what? You're going to see a lot of Ira in commoner only format. And a lot of the reason that people really dislike Blitz right now is the fact that they're tired of seeing Ira, and they're tired of seeing Prism and Dorinthea to a certain extent, and likely Briar soon, right? But you start to see, I mean, hopefully you're seeing my point here, right? That we've actually taken, like we talked about, like Dorinthea, I would consider to be like a tier 1 or a tier 1.5 Blitz person, Blitz hero, and like she's out. So like we're actually narrowing the field. You go likely to, I mean, Prism is, I mean, no secret there, Luminaris is off the table. So, you know, you lose the go again type thing. And she pretty much just, I mean, you know, you lose a lot of your auras as well, but like she just skews to Heralds. And I mean, anybody who was around during Monarch playing draft, you knew how well she did, right? Unless she ran up against Levia, who has her own problems in the Pauper format. You have a pretty good time just throwing Heralds, right? Go the Herald Haymaker strategy all day long, and she's going to be pretty good. And guess what? Phantasmify, the gloves, right, can do good things, right? So Ira, Prism, they're pretty good. I mean, right? They're names that we've heard in other formats. And you know, lastly, Briar. Right, Briar is just good stuff, right? And I put there, quote, Briar don't care, right? She's just going to play good stuff FaB. Non-attack, Rosetta. Rosetta's a token, right? It's included. Non-attack, attack, Rosetta, and FU, brah. So sure, she's going to lose some of her stuff. Like she'll lose Weave Lightning, she'll lose Lightning Press, right? Not insignificant, but she can backfill with some less efficient stuff, right? Vigor Rush, that's a question I've been asking a long time, is why aren't people playing Vigor Rush? The answer is because it's just more expensive than the good stuff. Like you play Vigor Rush, you're playing Nimblism, you can play Nimble Strike, right? It gets plus and go again for 1, and you're paying for, I mean, there's a lot of good options there for Briar, and like, in a less efficient format, I mean, sure, she loses a bit of efficiency, but she does not lose it at the same rate the other heroes do, right? So you're naturally seeing this problem of Ira, Prism, Briar being at the top, and a lot of the other heroes actually taking bigger hits, right? So not last, but one more thing I want to add is there's a little unclarity on how we would handle rarity differences. I mean, this is not an end-all problem, but you do notice like Springboard and Lunging, right? They were both commons in the Welcome to Wraith starter decks. They were commons. I actually say WTR number C. But they were rares in Crucible War. Now, I would assume that we as the community would agree that the lowest printing qualifies. But the reason I'm bringing this up is we're looking at a new supplemental set soon. It's completely viable that they could reprint. I mean, they're probably not going to reprint CNC or whatever as a rare or whatever, but, you know, hopefully you pick up what I'm laying down here is like it's potential that in the future cards that used to be Majestic might be less, cards that used to be rare might become commons because they become more fundamental. So do we gravitate towards the lower rarity? Do we gravitate towards the higher rarity because we're trying to be more exclusive? And again, it's something that you'll have to determine in your own group because again, there's no formal system. But if we were to move to a formal system, do you skew towards the higher side, which is including more? Which sounds good now, but like in 15 years from now, if we've already established a system and we're bringing in stuff that used to be Majestics and they're not, you know what? I mean, hopefully you understand. If you don't, then you're probably not worried about. So fair enough. So really, in conclusion, there's no argument to me that these budget formats serve as a great purpose. You know, their purpose is community fun, right? It's community building, and it gives people something else to do instead of smashing CC or Blitz again. So I highly encourage doing it. But probably we have to figure out, probably we can't just say commons only, because if you do commons only, people are going to show up with Ira. And then why is it any different? You know, that's what I'm saying is like you're trying to do something different, but if the only thing you're doing different is making sure that people don't have Mask of Momentum, I don't know that that's really accomplishing your community goal. Right? I mean, I guess your community goal is to get more people in the door. That's completely fair, right? If your goal is to get more people in the door, whatever you need to do it, you do your community, 100% behind you. But fundamentally, if you're trying to sell, I guess my takeaway here is if you're trying to sell commoner only as a more pure, better format of Flesh and Blood, I don't know that that's true, because I think it's actually more limiting today. That may change in the future, but I think today, if you look at the heroes who are going to rise to the top, it's more of the what many of us would consider to be the toxic. I mean, toxic. No, sorry, toxic has a different word, but it's what many of us would consider to be, the fatigue, the part that we're fatigued, right? The part of Flesh and Blood that we're fatigued of, I think actually is what's rising to the top in the commoner or the budget formats, because it's just the most efficient stuff. So that is certainly something to consider if you are going to be running multiple of these events over a long time in your community. That's my takeaway. And I think the fact that there's a lot of groups out there. So the 6 rares is a big thing that I've heard from several groups in the community. The reason they chose 6 rares is because that's actually generally how many are in the Blitz decks, which means that somebody could go to the store and buy the Blitz deck and then sit down and play it, which is a really, really good idea, right? So they allow the 6 rares. But if 6, why not 8? If 8, why not 10? Well, what about 1 Majestic, right? And again, as long as your rules are all solid and everybody's on the same pages, it's really not a problem. But again, it kind of either needs to be one or the other. I mean, I made the argument very, very early on. This was back in, I think it was Arcane Rising days. I got in a huge argument with this less than polite gentleman on Facebook. He was like, well, pauper format. And I was like, I don't think there's enough cards to do that really right now. I was like, I think you should go commons and rares. And there's a lot of people that agreed with me, and he was like, no, pauper's pauper, and that's the way it is. And I was like, okay, fair, man. I mean, I'm out. But I think the reason I'm telling that story is to kind of highlight that we need to be flexible in how we think about this, right? If we say, well, it's only commons, we need to realize that we're hamstringing ourselves to that. If we say commons and rares, even so, we need to realize we're hamstringing ourselves to that. So how do you design your community for you? I mean, the answer overall is what your community is willing to. And if you're having a new player friendly thing, you know what? Maybe it's not a bad thing. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if people are going to leave happy if even a new player, if they walk in and they see 8 Briars at the top, what's the impression they're going to leave with, right? And that's kind of what I'm saying is whether they want to play Briar or Ira or whatever it may be, if they come in and they look at Dorinthea or they look at Azalea and they want to, well, Azalea's a bad example because you can't do that anyway, but they look at a Dorinthea or they look at someone who's perfectly legitimate and you can pretty consistently play in a constructed format, and they're not viable because there's only 3 to 4 heroes viable in a pauper format or a commoner format. I do think that can send the wrong message. So, like I said, I think you guys know your community, and you know your new community, you know your people, you know your play group, which is going to play a large part in that. So I'm not in any way trying to pretend that I know the right answer, because it's going to change by group. But what I am trying to do is call more attention to some of the risks of a pure commoner format or some of these other type of formats, and saying, look, understand how limiting this is currently, and that we may need to take special steps to keep that in check. And again, as I've hinted at several times here, this may fix itself, probably, almost will certainly fix itself as the card pool expands. But as of right now, when we're trying to run these events, I think we need to be very, very careful and talk to the established players in our community about some of these pitfalls, right? So anyway, that's my piece. Now, I know a lot of you guys, again, like I mentioned on the very, very intro here, a lot of you guys are very, very passionate about this subject and have been running these type of events way more volume. I've played a couple commoner games, but not very many, right? And I want to hear from you, right? Am I wrong, right? Is this not what's happening? And is it's not what's happening? The follow-up to that is this what's happening? Am I wrong about the format? And if I am not wrong about, or if I am wrong about the format, is it only because of the players, or is it because I'm evaluating the card pool and my experience is incorrectly? So that's what I want to know. Give me your feedback. So anyway, like I said, I'm really interested in having this conversation, because when I look at this, and again, based on my experiences in my games, it looks pretty limiting and it looks risky as if someone comes in, they're like, I'm only going to be a commoner player. Our hope is that we can convert them, right? But what if they do want to be a commoner player forever? They're only going to play 14 games and be like, I'm tired of running Ira, or I'm tired of losing to Ira because they wanted Dorinthea or whatever it may be, right? So I do think as community leaders and community participants, that is something that we need to consider when we're trying to approach these type of events. That's really all I'm saying. That's really all I'm saying for this tonight. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me for the conversation. Again, I realize it's, not necessarily the current situation, but there's been a lot, we've just gotten out of a lull, right? We've come out of a very, very heavy competitive season. Granted, we're going into skirmish and all that, but like we've come out of a very, very public competitive season, and there's going to be people who saw that and are going to want to come in and check it out. And furthermore, coming out of that, there's a lot of people who are going to want to take their mental break. So it's a good time to start doing these formats like that, doing these community building activities. So that's why I thought it was good to have the conversation now on, some potential pitfall trap, that's a card, right? Yeah, it is, right? See, I did that intentionally. Anyway, you guys know what I'm saying. And if you're here, bless your heart. So anyway, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Again, I want to remind everybody about Gongai Games. We are playing there every Saturday in 9 days. We have 9 days from when I'm shooting this, 8 days from when it's going up. Sorry about that. 8 days from now, we are having a skirmish. It is a draft skirmish. So I will be there, and hopefully you will be too. Come join us. It'll be a good time. And then furthermore, remind everybody, FaB Foundry, my boy Travis over there, still selling singles. If you're going to go buy singles, check out the link below. Go support a local boy and support this channel. So anyway, folks, thank you very much. Again, I do want to hear from you. I do want to hear your opinions on the subject, even if I'm a moron, which I probably am. But let me know your feedback, how you've been able to control some of the problems that I've addressed, because I think the problems I've addressed are perfectly valid. I'm curious how you've done it, or if your community is just so awesome that it hasn't come up yet. And if it is, good for freaking you. So anyway, folks, thank you very much, and go Commando.